Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rogue Squadron. I am your host, Philip, and in today's episode, we're going to be continuing our movie reviews as we did last week, and we're going to be talking about a somewhat underrated film. I know it's gotten great reviews, critic and audience wise, and there's been a ton of people to go see it at the movie theater from firsthand experience. But we're going to be talking about DreamWorks' latest project called The Wild Robot. Me and my mom, we saw it the other day, and it was absolutely phenomenal. I cleaned a couple theaters like before I saw it, so I knew how it ended and everything. But watching the movie from beginning to end, it was really good. It kind of had like the vibes of like a Wall-E. Um, I really enjoyed it. I would definitely highly recommend um, for parents, with small children and just families in general, or if you just want to go see a good movie. Obviously, DreamWorks is a pretty well-known company, making the likes of Kung Fu Panda and How to Train Your Dragon and Shrek, and they really knocked this one out of the park. And it's probably one of the better movies of the fall, and I would say the end of the year. It's definitely like blown like something like Joker out of the water. But yeah, before we get into that, just a little quick update, let you guys know how I am doing. So I'm doing pretty well. Just kind of same old. Just continuing to develop that routine. Going to the gym, going to work, and then on my days off, I try to balance between going to work. I'm sorry, going to the gym and relaxing. So today, I had the day off, so I decided to take more of like a mental health, slash self care day. After having a nice, delicious brunch, I decided to sit down and record a quick episode for you guys before I get busy with the rest of the weekend and next week. I have work tomorrow, and then Sunday I am going to a Lego convention. So maybe I'll do some recording and I'll post it on YouTube or Instagram and just show you guys what is going on there. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. And yeah, like I said, I thought I had the time, so I might as well just sit down and record a quick video for you guys. um, so obviously, like I said, we are going to be talking about the Wild Robot today. I believe the Wild Robot came out towards the end. Excuse me. Came out towards the end of September. Hmm, excuse me. It came out towards the end of September. So it's been in theaters for, almost well over a month. And honestly, I don't see it leaving anytime soon. There are a couple movies that are coming out, either some Halloween movie re-releases, or I know Smile 2 comes out today. So it might eventually get pushed out of theaters, but it is doing extremely well still, whether it's in a big theater or a small theater. So I definitely see them holding on to it a little bit, probably until getting into November, if I had to guess. Um, I don't have the scores for the movie off the top of my head, but I know they are both like in the 90s when it comes to Rotten Tomatoes, both critic and audience wise. And like I said, it was a phenomenal film, and I highly recommend everybody goes to see it. So my personal review of it, I would probably give it honestly a solid 10 out of 10 suns. I didn't really see anything wrong with it. Just like any kids movie or DreamWorks movies, there might be a couple of cliches that you see how the scene is going and you're like, oh, okay, well, this is the direction they're going to be going in. But that doesn't warrant really enough for me to take off like even half a point or even a whole point, to be honest. Excuse me. I really enjoyed the film. I thought it had a great message behind it. I thought the visuals and animation was stunning, and I thought the story was pretty good as well. Like I said, it kind of reminded me of like a Wall-E vibe, but a little different, obviously. So yeah, I would give it a solid 10 out of 10 suns. Because I don't really have a lot to say about this movie, I'm going to go into like a quick like summary of exactly what happens in the movie, and then we'll kind of go into the positives that I had about this film. So obviously the film starts off with a animatronic robot basically waking up. It was en route with a bunch of other robots to a human facility. Basically, I think the whole backdrop with this movie is that the world has ended in some way, whether it's been like global warming or some sort of like natural disaster. Because you see like later shots in the films of like cities underwater, humpback whales swimming over the Golden Gate Bridge. So it seems like humanity has survived, but they kind of like put themselves in these little like glass spheres, and they kind of have like civilization like in these like little pockets, I guess, across the world. So obviously the rest of the world has been re-engulfed by nature, in the forces around it. I guess humanity has evolved, obviously, and they rely heavily on like robotics and animatronics. So there is a unit of robots called the Rozz. And basically they're designed to be like helper robots, with every single task, whether it's, taking care of the house or, doing your gardening or mowing your lawn. They're supposed to be like basically like, your right-hand man. So, like, each family's supposed to get one. And they're supposed to be like, the new future, I guess. We see a container of Rozz units obviously wash up on this island. And that's where we meet our main character, Rozz. I mean, obviously she has a serial number and everything, but we come to know her as Rozz. And she's the only one that so happened to survive this like crash of her container unit, which is pretty lucky on her part. But slowly but surely she wakes up and she's basically just kind of like discovering the world around her. And this is where we see like exactly what she's programmed to do. She's running around and she's trying to talk to these animals and trying to get them to like give her like certain tasks and whatever, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a task to complete and then move on to the next one. So we see that obviously she's exploring this very unfamiliar world. Obviously all the animals around her like are very skeptical. They don't know who she is, and they basically all hate her. They call her like a monster, and they're all scared of her, and they basically just run away every single time she's around, pretty much. Eventually we see, her exploration come to fruition, where she is eventually chased by a bear. The bear is eventually voiced by Mark Hamill in the film, which I thought was pretty cool. But we see after she escapes, she ended up actually crashing onto a goose nest and unfortunately killing the mother goose and most of the eggs that were in the nest, except for just one. And this is where we see a little bit of shift in Rozz. She ends up taking the egg, and we see that after a brief, back and forth with a fox called Think, who is voiced by Pedro Pascal, of all people, which again I thought was really cool. She ends up taking the egg back, and the egg actually hatches. And we see that there's a little gooseling in it. And obviously gooselings imprint on the first thing that they see. So obviously the gooseling imprinted on Rozz, and this is where we see kind of like some sort of like internal override going on within Rozz. She's basically like rewriting her own program or overriding her program, and we see this like change in her. And with the help of Think, as well as a mother possum and her children, Rozz is given the task of obviously raising this gooseling. Eventually, when the gooseling gets a little bit older, she decides to name it Brightbill based off of its appearance. And we see, throughout the film that Rozz is basically doing everything that she can to teach this gooseling how to swim, how to eat, and then eventually how to fly. There is a little bit of a time jump within the film, and we see that, Brightbill is, either like an adolescent or maybe like a young adult. I think he's probably more of like a teenager. But we see that he's not exactly like other geese because he's been raised by Rozz. So he's very like animatronic, and like his mannerisms are very like robotic. Like it's almost like he thinks he's like part robot and part goose. We see that when he is learning how to swim, he actually ends up stumbling upon a whole flock of geese, and he tries to communicate with them and basically become friends with them. Excuse me. And they obviously make fun of him. Not only do they make fun of, the way he talks and sounds and just communicates, but they also make fun of him because he is what you would consider like a runt of the litter. He is extremely small, and to be honest, if the forces of nature were left alone, most likely he would have died without any intervention. Obviously, up until this part, Brightbill doesn't exactly know what happened to his actual organic family. He just thinks that Rozz is his mother, basically. Obviously, the goose being bullies and gossips, they end up telling Bright Bill that Rozz was actually the reason for his real family's death. Um, and this basically kind of sends him into like a shockwave. Basically, he feels like he was like lied to his whole entire life, and because of that, he basically just like kind of tells Rozz and Think to just like f off basically, and we see that there is this like huge tension that builds between like Rozz and Bright Bill. And along the way, just keep in mind in the background, obviously, as Rozz is trying to raise Bright Bill, the other animals like around her on the island are starting to get a little bit more curious, and they're starting to kind of like watch her a little bit more closely. We see that there's a specific beaver that starts to kind of take like a uncanny like to her. There's a part in the film where she ends up losing one of her legs to save Bright Bill, and he actually like ends up fashioning a like makeshift leg out of bark for her to wear temporarily. And again, this is where we see like more of Rozz's emotions kind of come to the forefront, which is weird because obviously she's a robot, so she shouldn't be having any of these emotions or whatever. Eventually, as the film continues, Bright Bill and Rozz kind of come to some sort of understanding. The last thing that she has to do with her task is basically teach him how to fly. She knows that if she doesn't teach him how to fly, then he can't take part in the next migration. And if he doesn't take part in the next migration, most likely he is going to die if he stays on the island when winter comes. So they agree to work together temporarily in order to, help teach him how to fly. And then this is where we get more of a montage on Rozz just being really determined on teaching Bright Bill how to fly. Not only that, but we see like she kind of has these like motherly instincts going in. She's leaking some sort of like green fluid, but she could care less. She's more just focused on helping Bright Bill and getting him to the end, basically. It gets to the point where she ends up building this whole runway basically out of stone as more of like a landing, I guess like a runway to kind of help him like, take off the ground and teach him how to fly. Eventually, the lessons aren't going too well, so they end up enlisting the help of a hawk. And the hawk, because it is very small and nimble, can kind of relate to Bright Bill. And, the hawk is able to basically teach Bright Bill how to fly. And, we get in this moment where an elder goose by the name of Longneck, who is voiced by Bill Nye. I don't know if it's Bill Nye the Science Guy, but because it did not sound like him, but that would be really cool if it was Bill Nye. And he is actually very impressed with the progress that Bright Bill has made. And after him and Rozz have a discussion, he basically tells Rozz to keep him in the air from dawn to dusk, and he must build up his stamina, he must build up his strength in order to, be involved in the next migration, because the next migration is taking place in a week. So obviously we get this huge montage. Sorry, there was like a bee or a wasp that was like banging on my window. We get this huge montage of basically, Rozz and Bright Bill constantly practicing with the hawk, using the runway. Rozz ends up making these like wooden circles for like Bright Bill to kind of like fly in and out of. Eventually the training montage comes to a conclusion where he's able to lift a boulder off the ground in his legs as he's flying, showing that obviously his training has paid off and came a very long way. We end up fast forwarding to Rozz, Think, and Bright Bill heading to the meeting spot for the geese before the migration. After, Rozz and Longneck have a conversation, Longneck is very impressed and admires Rozz and basically thanks her and everything. And there is this like quick little tension between Rozz and Bright Bill, where Bright Bill wants to say something, but he's kind of afraid to, or he hesitates. And he ends up leaving without, telling Rozz what he was going to say. And this is really where we see like the final straw and like Rozz like kind of hit. And we can tell that she's basically like in full mother mode, because then she chases after the migration, and she basically watches like Bright Bill take off with the rest of the geese. And in this period, we kind of see like some sort of transition. Excuse me. The rest of autumn has ended. and winter is upon us, so all the animals are like taking shelter for the winter. And Rozz, seeing that her task is complete, ends up like activating her tracking beacon so she can go home to where she belongs. Um, we have a little bit of a cut, and then as we enter the third act, we see that Rozz actually decided to turn off her tracking beacon and return back to the home that she built for her and Brightbill. And we see in this moment that when she reboots, Think is actually there with her. And he basically explains to her that this winter is extremely bad, and he even got cold all the way underground. So this basically sparks her to, I guess, sort of develop a new task where she goes around the island with Think, and she helps all these poor animals and brings them back to the home, surrounded by the fire and the warmth, in order to keep them alive for the winter. And at first, it doesn't necessarily go too well because obviously all the animals are trying to kill each other. But after some motivational speaking from both Think and Rozz, they agree to like a temporary truce for the winter so they could all survive. While this is all going on back on the island, obviously Brightbill is taking part in the migration with Longneck and the other geese. They end up actually coming across the spherical dome that I was telling you guys about earlier, where the humans are actually residing in order to take shelter from a thunderstorm. Brightbill thinks that Rozz is actually there, and he doesn't realize that there are a bunch of other Rozz robots like in production. And when the geese are spotted, obviously like there are alarms raised and triggers are raised, and the geese like fly into a panic. Because Brightbill has experience with the Rozz units, Longneck tells him that he is the only one that could lead the flock out of the dome to safety. And after some intense flying and maneuvering, Longneck ends up sacrificing himself in order for the other geese to escape the sphere and continue their migration. Eventually, as spring comes around, Rozz reawakens from her slumber after almost basically being powered down because of probably mechanical issues or what's going on inside her. We see that spring has arrived, obviously, and the first thing that she does is look for the return of the migration. So after scanning for a while, she sees that Brightbill has returned, and with that, she feels like her task is complete now, and she reactivates her tracking beacon, or she was going to reactivate her tracking beacon in order to return home. Obviously, Think has a very funny reunion with Brightbill, and after some exchanges of words, Think basically explains to Brightbill that Rozz ended up staying to make sure he got back from his migration. And after hearing that, Brightbill goes to search for Rozz so he could finally tell her what he was trying to tell her, all those months ago, basically. We see that before Rozz even has a chance to activate her tracking beacon, there's actually a ship from the human colony that is sent to basically retrieve her. And thinking her task is complete, she eventually climbs on board to basically return. But after hearing Think call out and saying that Brightbill has returned and he's looking for her, Rozz ends up changing her mind and basically going back into the wilderness to find Brightbill. This obviously upsets the animatronic that came to receive her, so the animatronic ends up unleashing all these other robots in order to basically burn down the forest and retrieve the Rozz unit. This is where we kind of get a cool little montage shot where they say the name of the film, and she's like, "I am a wild robot," and they all howl, which is actually pretty cool. And we get this little montage of the animals fighting the robots. Eventually, they're actually all successful, and they end up defeating the robots, but the other robot that was controlling them ends up self-destructing them, kind of causing a panic and a fire in the forest. Rozz is eventually captured in all the commotion, and the animals are now facing disaster as the whole forest around them basically burns. The Rozz aboard the ship is in jeopardy of getting her memories wiped and everything by the other robot, and eventually they start the process of wiping her memories and everything. While they're doing that, basically Brightbill and the other geese fly to start attacking and distracting the ship. Meanwhile, the other animals enlist the aid of the beaver, who in this whole entire movie has been slowly but surely chopping away at this tree. They end up enlisting his help in order to push over this huge, large tree to basically dam part of a river and have the overflow basically extinguish the fires of all of the the forest around them. Excuse me. Let me just take another sip of coffee. In the confusion of the flight and everything, Bright Bill is actually able to penetrate the window by basically crashing into it, and finds Rozz. Eventually, he confesses that he basically loves her and calls her mom. This is where we see like a little bit of a shift, and like Rozz actually wakes up after having all of her memories and everything wiped, which is extremely peculiar because like you would think that she was basically just like reset the factory mode. So why is she still remembering? The whole premise of this film is basically, I guess, to kind of show that even robots can have emotions and feelings, and she stops using this and she starts using more of her heart, or her like robotic heart. And that's basically what kind of like kept her alive and like rebooted her. Eventually, after a standoff with the other robot, they're able to defeat it and escape the ship. And obviously the ship crash lands and explodes in fiery glory. And at the end of the day, the animals were able to save the island from being destroyed by the fire and also save Rozz. However, after some thought, Rozz decides that she's going to voluntarily still go back to the human civilization, because she knows that if she doesn't, they're just going to keep sending ship after ship to come find her and retrieve her, and she doesn't want to put her family and friends in jeopardy. So after a very heartfelt goodbye and helping them like rebuild the home and the structure in the forest, Rozz ends up activating her tracking beacon, and a ship takes her back to the human civilization. We get a little bit of a time jump where we see that it is winter once again, and all the animals are sheltering in the home that Rozz and them built. And, Fink is basically recounting a story for the next generation about the story of Rozz and, what happened over these last couple of months. The camera eventually ends up pivoting back to the human civilization, where we see that the geese are in their migration again. Bright Bill ends up infiltrating the human civilization once again and stumbles upon the Rozz unit. And at first things are a little tense, but after Rozz kneels down, she ends the film by basically saying, but you can call me Rozz, and then showing that even though she was like basically reprogrammed and repaired and, working in this human civilization, she still remembers who she is and everything around her. So obviously the two of them embrace, and then it goes to credits pretty much. And like I said, it was a beautiful film. There is a post-credit scene where Fink and the beaver are replanting a sapling for where the big tree once stood. And then obviously there's a squirrel just laughing and just being a squirrel. And then Fink obviously pelts it with a pine cone. And then the screen cuts to black. And then that is the official end of the film. So before I wrap up this episode, obviously that was a pretty rough but standard summary of what exactly happened in the film. I think some positives to kind of look into for the rest of the film. The animation style was absolutely brilliant. The cinematography was also very brilliant as well. The voice acting in this film was top notch. We had Bill Nye, we had Mark Hamill, we had Pedro Pascal. Excuse me. The person that voiced Bright Bill, I don't remember the name of the woman that voiced Rozz, but she was also very phenomenal. And just the message behind it, obviously this film is kind of geared towards, I would say, families, maybe like parents and especially mothers, kind of like, showing a mother's journey from like, when they first have their child to like letting their child go and like spread its wings, supposedly. I know when I saw it, my mom cried at the end, because it does tug on a certain heartstring for her probably, and other mothers as well. But yeah, I thought the film was absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, I would give it a 10 out of 10 suns. If it's still in your theaters, go see it. Whether you're my age or, you have kids, family, friends, whoever you are, go see it. It's a cute film. It's nice, a little bit of a stress reliever and kind of like a chuckle fest and stuff like that. But other than that, that is going to conclude our little discussion today on the Wild Robot. So obviously this one was a little bit more like unexpected, because I didn't really know what I was going to do for another episode after the Joker, which obviously you guys really love that review and you guys are crushing it with the views. We also gained another new subscriber, so thank you. So this one kind of fell into my lap, and I was like, well, might as well do it while it's still fresh in the mind, basically. Um, I have a couple of other ideas of what I want to do for future episodes. Obviously, working at the movies kind of helps because I can go see the movies and then do a review on it after. Um, but yeah, let me know down in the comments what you guys thought about the Wild Robot if you saw it, or give me suggestions for like other topics in like movies or TV shows that you want me to cover. Obviously, I'm in the process of watching Agatha all along. Um, I finished Rings of Power season 1 and season 2, so I could always sit down and talk about that. But yeah, just let me know down in the comments what you guys want to see, and let me know what you think. But like I said, before we finish this episode, you could find me on YouTube at the Rogue Squadron. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at the Rogue Squadron. So, drop me a follow, again, leave some likes and comments on there. I'll post on those socials when the episodes come out. That way you guys are notified. But yeah, other than that, like I said, go follow those socials, go see the Wild Robot, and until we see each other again, I hope you guys have a great day, great morning, afternoon, evening, great night. Hopefully you guys are staying safe. You're not doing anything stupid. It is a couple of days until Halloween, so we are all getting ready for spooky season. And if you guys are enjoying spooky season, good for you. Go watch some scary movies, eat some candy, go to some parties, but be safe. Don't do anything stupid. And I will see you guys all in the next one. Goodbye for now.